My name isn't important. What matters is the story I'm finally brave enough to tell. A story I hid behind makeup, long sleeves, and forced smiles for far too long. People think abuse happens suddenly, like a storm that appears overnight, violent and unmistakable. But in my marriage, it began like a slow drizzle, so gentle at first that I barely noticed I was getting soaked. By the time I realized I was drowning, it felt too late to escape. Amir and I met when I still believed in fairy tales. He was charming in the way men in romance novels are, attentive, quick to listen, quicker to smile. He opened doors for me, bought me flowers, and held my hand like I was delicate china he wanted to keep safe forever. My friends envied me. My parents adored him. I adored him too, blindly. But something about him changed after the wedding, or maybe I changed, or maybe, more truthfully, the mask he wore cracked, just enough for me to see what lay beneath. At first, it was small things: a raised voice, a harsh word, a subtle insult said with a smile. You're gaining weight. Why are you wearing that? Is this how you talk to your husband? I convinced myself these comments were normal. Every couple fights, right? Every marriage has flaws, that's what I told myself. But then came the first slap. It happened on a humid July evening. I forgot to add salt to the lentils, and Amir slammed his spoon down, stared at me with cold, unfamiliar eyes, and struck me across the face. Hard, the sound echoed in the kitchen like something breaking. Maybe it was the plate on the floor, maybe it was my trust, I don't know. I only remember the sting on my cheek and the shock that made me unable to breathe. He apologized later. Held me in his arms, whispered that he was stressed, that he didn't mean it, that it was just a mistake. And God help me, I forgave him. But the second slap came sooner. And the third. Soon it wasn't just slaps. It was his hand gripping my arm hard enough to bruise. It was him pushing me, shoving me, dragging me. It was him controlling who I spoke to, where I went, what I wore. I stopped visiting friends because he didn't like them. I stopped calling my parents because he said they filled my head with nonsense. I stopped being myself because I didn't know who she was anymore. I became quiet, careful, small. People around me didn't notice. They saw a woman who smiled politely, who said, "I'm fine," with practiced ease. They didn't see the bruises beneath my clothes or the fear beneath my skin. I learned to cover everything, physically and emotionally. I lied to neighbors about my clumsiness. I lied to relatives about his kindness. But the worst lie was the one I kept telling myself: I can fix this. He will change. It's not always this bad. Every night, when Amir came home, I could tell by the sound of his keys whether it would be a peaceful evening or a painful one. The air in the house would tighten, as if even the walls were holding their breath, and I would hold mine too. The breaking point came on a night that smelled of rain and fear. He came home furious. A business deal had collapsed. Someone had insulted him. The outside world had bruised his ego, so he came home to bruise me. I didn't say anything wrong. I didn't have to. Sometimes my silence was enough to provoke him. He grabbed me by the hair, pulled me to the floor, and kicked me in the ribs. I curled up, but he kept hitting. His anger was loud, but my screams were quiet. They always were. Eventually, his blows blurred together into a haze of pain. I remember one final strike. Then nothing. When I opened my eyes again, I wasn't on the floor of my living room. I was in a hospital bed. And my husband was sitting beside me, pretending to be worried. But that was the day everything changed. When I woke up, it felt as though I was floating, caught somewhere between consciousness and a nightmare I couldn't shake. The room was too bright, too cold, too white. Machines beeped softly around me. My body ached in ways I didn't know a body could ache. Every breath felt like it scraped against broken glass. Amir sat beside my bed, hands clasped together, his face twisted into an expression of rehearsed worry. If anyone else saw him, they would think he was the picture of a devoted husband. But I knew that look. It wasn't concern. It was fear. Fear of losing control. Fear of consequences. "Oh, thank God you're awake," he said, leaning forward as if we were a loving couple. "You had an accident. You fell down the stairs. You've been unconscious for hours. Unconscious for hours. Fell down the stairs." I blinked slowly, my mind foggy but not enough to believe him. I didn't fall. I remembered the blows, the shouting, the darkness swallowing me whole. Still, I said nothing. I had lived so long in silence it had become instinct. The doctor entered a moment later. He carried a clipboard and a seriousness that filled the entire room. He introduced himself, but I barely caught his name. I was too focused on the way his eyes shifted from me to Amir. Then back to me, sharp, analyzing, understanding far too quickly. "Mrs. Khan," he said gently, "do you remember what happened?" I opened my mouth, but the words dissolved on my tongue. Before I could even attempt to speak, Amir jumped in. "She fell down the stairs," he repeated quickly, like a child who had memorized a line in a play. "She's always so clumsy. I told her to be careful." The doctor didn't nod, didn't agree, didn't even turn toward him. Instead, he placed the chart on a table and spoke with a calm firmness that made my heartbeat quicken. "These injuries are not consistent with falling down stairs." Amir stiffened beside me. The doctor continued, unfazed. "You have multiple rib contusions, a hairline fracture on your arm, and patterned bruising across your back and legs. These are defensive wounds, injuries that happen when a person tries to protect themselves." My throat tightened. "Also," he added, "there are signs of repeated trauma, older bruises, injuries in different stages of healing. This is not the result of a single fall." Amir's face paled. "Doctor, you're mistaken." "I'm not mistaken," the doctor cut in. His voice was polite, but unyielding. "Sir, I'm going to ask you to step outside so I can speak with my patient privately." The authority in that single sentence stunned both of us. I had never heard anyone talk to Amir like that. Not colleagues, not friends, not family. Definitely not me. Amir tried to protest. "I'm her husband. And this is a medical evaluation." The doctor replied firmly. "You can wait outside." For the first time in years, Amir didn't win. Security had been alerted already, though I didn't know that until much later. 2 guards appeared at the door, their presence silently pressuring him to obey. He left, but not without glaring at me. A glare that promised, "You'll pay for this." When the door finally closed, I felt a strange mix of terror and relief. The doctor pulled up a chair beside me. He didn't invade my space. He didn't push. He simply waited, giving me silence that felt safe. Safer than anything I had felt in years. "Mrs. Khan," he said softly, "you are safe right now. No one can hurt you here. But I need to know the truth so I can help you." I broke. Tears spilled down my cheeks before I could stop them. My lips trembled, my entire body shook, and in a broken whisper, I finally said the words I had swallowed for years. "If he did this, my husband." The doctor nodded, not shocked, not judging, just understanding, as if he had seen countless women, just like me, walk through these halls with the same wounds, the same fear, the same silence. "Thank you for telling me," he said. "I'm going to make sure you get the support you need." He explained that the hospital had protocols for domestic violence cases, that he had already documented the injuries, that security would not allow Amir near me again, that social services and legal support could be arranged if I agreed. For the first time in a long time, someone believed me. Someone saw me. Someone protected me. As he left the room briefly, a nurse squeezed my hand and whispered, "You're safe. It's going to be okay." I didn't fully believe it then, but it was the moment a new life began. Leaving the hospital felt like stepping into a world I didn't recognize. The sky looked different, as if someone had dialed down its brightness. The air felt heavier, almost uncertain, as though it didn't quite know what to do with a woman who had been invisible for so long. I sat in the back seat of the transport vehicle arranged by the hospital, clutching a paper bag filled with donated clothes, and the few belongings the staff had collected from my room. My ribs throbbed with every breath, but the deeper ache was somewhere behind my sternum, somewhere the X-rays couldn't reach. The women's shelter was tucked away in a quiet corner of the city, a small building painted a soft blue that I instantly felt safe looking at. A social worker named Miriam greeted me at the entrance. She was warm in a grounded way, no pity, no forced smiles, just the steady presence of someone who understood survival. "You're safe here," she said, guiding me inside. "And you're not alone." For a moment those words stung. Not alone. I had spent years feeling completely alone, even while sharing a house with a man who claimed ownership of my existence. But here, surrounded by soft light and gentle voices, the phrase meant something else. The shelter housed women of all ages, some younger than me, some older, some carrying toddlers on their hips, others carrying nothing but the weight of their trauma. Our stories were different, but our eyes carried the same haunted shadow. And yet, every evening, when we gathered for communal dinner, there was an undercurrent of quiet resilience, like embers still alive beneath the ashes. The next morning, the shelter connected me with a legal advocate named Farah. She was small in stature, but carried herself with the steady fire of a woman who had waged these battles countless times. "You don't have to decide everything right now," she told me, "but you do have choices. Real choices, choices." The word itself felt foreign. Farah walked me through my legal options: filing charges, seeking a protective order, initiating divorce. Each path felt terrifying and empowering at once. But when she reminded me that returning to Amir meant returning to violence, possibly worse, I signed the papers with hands that shook but did not stop. Therapy began a week later. My therapist, a woman named Sana, had eyes that held entire oceans of unspoken understanding. In her office, I slowly unwrapped memories like fragile glass shards, sharp, painful, but necessary to examine. She never pushed. She simply listened, nodding gently as I spoke in scraps, in whispers, in trembling confessions. "You survived," she said one afternoon, "and surviving takes strength. Even when you didn't feel strong." Something inside me shifted. At the shelter, I helped in the kitchen to keep my mind occupied. Eventually, one of the volunteers mentioned a nearby bakery looking for part-time help. I hesitated. My confidence had been stripped down to threads, but they insisted I try. When the bakery owner, an elderly woman with flour always clinging to her sleeves, handed me an apron, it felt like she was handing me a small piece of myself. Days passed. My bruises faded. My nightmares softened. I learned to laugh again. Small laughs at first, tentative and careful, but laughter nonetheless. And with every passing day, I realized something vital: healing wasn't a single moment. It was a slow stitching of the soul, one tiny thread at a time. Then came the discovery that changed everything. Farah called me to her office with an urgency I wasn't used to. "Amir is under investigation," she said. "Not just for domestic violence. There are financial irregularities, fraud, possible tax evasion." I stared at her, stunned. She gently pushed a folder toward me. "Your name appears on some of the documents. He hid things in both your accounts. That gives you access." Inside were bank statements, email printouts, hidden transactions, pages and pages of secrets Amir never thought I would see, let alone understand. My hands trembled, but not from fear. For years, he had controlled every corner of my life. Now I held the truth, the kind that could unravel his entire world. Revenge didn't spark inside me like fire. It rose slowly, quietly, like dawn light seeping through a cracked window. Not to destroy him for the sake of it, but to finally reclaim every piece of myself he tried to crush. For the first time in years, I felt powerful. Not because I wanted to hurt him, but because I finally realized I didn't have to let him win. The day of the court hearing arrived with a chill in the air, the kind that made the world feel sharper, clearer. I stood outside the courthouse wearing clothes donated by the shelter, a simple blouse, clean trousers, and a scarf wrapped neatly around my hair. I looked ordinary, unremarkable, but inside I felt stronger than I ever had. My lawyer walked beside me, carrying a thick folder of evidence. Medical reports, photographs of my injuries, statements from doctors and nurses, and the financial records we had uncovered. Every document was a piece of truth Amir had tried to bury. Today, they would be unearthed. Amir entered the courtroom moments later. Even in the cold autumn light, he carried himself with arrogance. Chin lifted, shoulders squared, suit pressed to perfection. He scanned the room until his eyes landed on me. Something in his expression twitched. Shock, anger, disbelief. He had expected a broken woman. He found someone rebuilt. The judge called the session to order. Proceedings began. My lawyer presented the medical evidence first. The doctor testified with calm authority, explaining every injury, every bruise, every inconsistency in Amir's story. The courtroom listened in heavy silence. Then came my turn. My voice trembled at first, but with every sentence I spoke, the weight on my chest loosened. "I stayed because I was afraid," I said, "afraid of him. Afraid of starting over, afraid no one would believe me. But someone finally did, and now, I believe myself too." Amir's lawyer tried to twist my words, tried to paint me as hysterical, dramatic, manipulative. But something had shifted. The judge's eyes, the jury's expressions, even the spectators. It was clear they saw the truth. They saw him. The turning point came when my lawyer opened the financial file. Hidden bank accounts, false company registrations, cash transactions disguised as business expenses, fraud, tax evasion, evidence we found because he underestimated me. Amir's face drained of color as page after page was presented. He lunged forward in anger at one point, shouting that I had hacked him, that I was framing him. The judge struck the gavel sharply. "Control yourself, Mr. Khan. For the first time in our entire marriage, someone spoke to him with the authority I never had. When the judge read the verdict hours later, I didn't blink. Amir was found guilty on multiple counts: domestic abuse, financial fraud, obstruction of justice. He was sentenced, not lightly. His empire crumbled. His reputation dissolved, his false charm exposed. He looked at me one last time as officers placed him in handcuffs. There was no remorse in his eyes, only disbelief that he had finally lost. I didn't smile. Justice wasn't something to gloat over. It was something to breathe in, slowly, deeply, freely. I left the courthouse into a world that suddenly felt bigger, brighter, mine. My new apartment was small, but when I turned the key and stepped inside, I felt a warmth I hadn't felt in years. My own space, my own choices, my own future. That night I stood by the window, watching the city lights flicker like tiny promises. I wasn't the woman he broke. I was the woman who survived him. And as the moon rose slowly above the skyline, I whispered the truth I had earned with every step of my escape. I am free. For the first time, the world whispered back, yes, you are.